thank you so much for joining me today. I'm delighted in this video to share with you a Q&A video that Dr. Relly of Raw Vegan Doctor and I did on ex-veganism. We put a post in our Instagram pages asking people to submit their questions on concerns around veganism, ex-veganism, and here's the video on that. This is part one, and Dr. Relly has part two on her channel, so check that out. I do Q&As every month on my membership program, and I'm able to go into more detail with my answers in my membership program. We wanted to answer this rapid fire style for you all, so I hope you find this video useful. If you do, please like, comment, share the information, and subscribe. Enjoy. We are so excited for this video, and my name is Dr. Tumi Johnson from the channel The Poem Dances, and we have beautiful Dr. Relly. Dr. Relly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Areli. My handle on social media is Raw Vegan Doctor, and I'm so grateful that we are together to answer this Q&A session.
Yeah, we're super excited about it. Thank you for your wonderful questions. We're going to, because we got so many questions, we took the 15 questions we have, the top 15, and we're going to kind of answer it as almost a rapid fire, no more than 2 minutes each. We could both talk hours on each of the subjects, but we don't want to, we want to honor your time and honor our time. But understand that we're giving you our ideas and thoughts and our experience as medical doctors who both have nutrition training. I want to say that because some medical doctors don't, but we both do. I will leave a link to my website below so you can check out my training on that. And I'm sure Dr. Reddick can do the same thing. But we're bringing our nutrition expertise as well as our medical background, as well as our personal experiences as raw vegans. So we bring that to the table with love and humility to you in this Q&A.
Perfect.
I also want to just say one quick thing before we dive into the Q&A is that this conversation is not meant at all to look down or talk down to people who have chosen a different path for themselves in terms of going off the vegan route. But I know when we decided to come together to make this video, we really wanted to just empower people to know that on a vegan path, you can achieve and sustain optimal health. And so that's where we're coming from. And we're going to use your questions as a way to support and show you that. Anything else, Dr. Relly, before we begin?
No, I mean, I think it's very valid just to reiterate to people and reinforce what you said. We are medical doctors, but we also have a background in nutrition. I had my plant-based nutrition certificate by the University of Winchester in the UK. I'm a member of the plant-based health professionals in the UK, and I'm myself a raw vegan, and I've been in plant-based diet for over 10 years, let alone raw veganism. So I'm sure that Tumi's background is similar, so we know what we're talking about, not just by the textbooks, but also as a living example of this lifestyle.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll say really briefly, again, you can check the links down below. We'll leave them to our pages. I'm an internal medical doctor specialist, but my whole focus is on holistic health as a dancer and a doctor. And I worked for a year with Doctors Without Borders, working in malnutrition clinics in West Africa. So I had to get nutrition training for that. I also studied with Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And as a diplomat of the American Board of Integrative Holistic Medicine, I also had to study holistic nutrition, plus the self-study I keep doing every day in my holistic medical practice, helping people through nutrition to achieve their best life. So we're bringing all this to the table. Let's just dive into these questions, okay? Areli, do you want to read up the first one for us?
Sure. Should we start with your list or with mine?
Sure, we can start with my list, either one.
Okay, let's do that. So I have the first questions that Tumi fans ask. Okay, I'm not gonna say names. Just my question is how to get enough iron on a raw vegan diet. I know that there's iron in the green leaves, but not so much. So you have to eat so much of them to get the daily iron. I struggle with that.
Okay, I will give you my thoughts, and I'm looking down because I'm checking the timer so that we are on point with our questions, with our answers. But I'll share with you that I'll start from a personal story. My personal story is that actually I was anemic before moving to whole foods, vegan, and in my case, living foods diet. And part of the reason I was anemic was one, I wasn't digesting and assimilating the iron I was taking in through flesh, like fish and dairy products. I was a pescatarian at the time. So one thing I just want to really iterate is that it's not just about how much iron you're taking in, but also how much you're actually digesting and assimilating and absorbing. You can be popping all the iron you want to through meat and other flesh, but if you're not absorbing it because you're having bloating and irritable bowel syndrome or food intolerances, you could get anemic. Also, as a menstruating women usually need about 18 milligrams of iron a day. If you are having dysmenorrhea, heavy periods, which we see a lot of in high fat, high animal fat, high hormone diets from animal fats, you can have dysmenorrhea, which means you lose all that iron that you are taking in, or a lot of that iron. This was my case. I had very heavy, painful periods. I switched from eating meats and fish and dairy to a whole food plant diet, again, living foods diet. My anemia was gone. And I haven't had anemia since I became raw vegan 9 years ago now, including during my pregnancy when my iron needs went up. No anemia. Wonderful. So my point is, if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet and you're decreasing issues because of that, such as dysmenorrhea, and you're absorbing better because you're eating whole foods that you're supposed to be eating, you will not have this problem. But I will say good iron sources in the vegan diet include things, if you're eating cooked food like lentils and chickpeas, the legumes in general. I don't eat cooked foods, cooked meals. So what I do is I sprout. I do lentil sprouts, but you can also get it from nuts and seeds. I recommend soaking if you can to remove the anti-nutrients as much as possible. But seeds, nuts, sprouted legumes, and then yes, those leafy greens. And if you're eating that way and you're eating enough calories, you should do great with iron.
Yeah, my answer would be very, very similar, but also I want to point out, so better say, I agree with everything she said, and I will add that some people don't take into consideration that for iron absorption, we need vitamin C together.
Mm-hmm.
So many people can
Good
think
point.
that, oh, but I eat lots of greens, but are you eating your citruses with your greens? Whenever you do like a smoothie of mango or strawberries, like those kind of acidic fruit have a lot of vitamin C plus the leafy greens with your iron. So you have to combine them together. Or another thing that I would suggest is like there's different types of anemia. One is anemia due to the lack of iron, and another anemia is due to the lack of intrinsic factor, which is
Mm,
a hormone, a substance that we need and is produced by our um, stomach and small bowel. So whenever we have ex-vegans that never corrected their anemia, maybe there is an intrinsic cause, like more that has to do more with the system rather with the diet, and also that can be corrected because pernicious anemia, which is the name for that anemia due to the lack of intrinsic factor, has to do with autoimmunity sometimes. So if you have been eating processed food, animal foods, the Western American diet, it's all those processed foods are triggers for the immune system, and that's what we have autoimmune disorders. So just keep in mind what kind of anemia you may be dealing with, and remember your citruses. If it's like ferropenic anemia, which is lack of iron, or autoimmune related, which is the cause is like the diet and the bad lifestyle that we all came from. So those will be my
wonderful.
additions to that. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellie.
sure.
So I'll do the second question we have here.
Mhm.
my concern about veganism is when adolescents choose this diet. What effects, if any, are there on adolescent development, specifically for those born with a gender assignment of female, in terms of onset of menstruation and general maturation when eating a vegan diet?
Hmm. Well, I know a few girls that have been raw vegan from birth, just a
Hmm.
few of them. And their parents are actually long-term raw vegans. So these girls obviously have proper instruction because their parents are naturopaths and they kind of know exactly what the nutrition needs for specific ages are. So I think this question can be solved by the fact that children in early ages, they need definitely more fat than adults. I mean, we are a proponent of fruitarianism, and that's basically that applies to adults or like late adolescence and adult life. But for children, besides fruit, is extra fats, especially if
Mm.
they're in the growth phase. So in order to achieve all the milestones, definitely they need their appropriate calories and a balanced diet. So in terms of girls, it will be important to kind of pay more attention to the healthy fat ratio rather than 80-10-10. You know, for children probably is different. Probably the ratio of fat is higher for children. So specifically for girls, they need to have a little bit more of a fat content so their menstruation is not compromised.
It's a fantastic question. I'm so glad you brought up the issue of increased fat needs in children. I agree with what Dr. Ellie is saying. I would just add that I love this question because it highlights actually the fact that in at least in America, and I think a lot of the Western world, what we see is that puberty, the early onset of puberty, the too early onset of puberty is actually more of a problem. And we see this problem associated with high fats, especially high animal fats, and processed food. So we're seeing children, girls as young as 8, 9, beginning menarche, beginning their menstrual period. That's becoming more and more normal. But it's absolutely abnormal, and it doesn't come from a plant foods diet. It comes from the opposite of that. So if anything, a plant foods diet can actually help to prevent that issue. And we know that an early onset of menarche and an early onset of menstruation is associated with more dis-ease. I'm so sorry, more dis-ease later on in life. So these girls are at risk for diabetes and obesity, some cancers also. So plant foods can actually be protective, again, if it is whole plant foods, unprocessed, natural fruits, vegetables, good amounts of nuts and seeds with good fats. This can be super helpful. And I want to also say this: a lot of people don't know that one of the biggest nutritional bodies, experts in the world, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, I will leave a link to them down below, has stated that a plant foods diet is a wonderful diet to have at all stages of life. And that includes adolescence, teenagehood, puberty as well. So I would actually recommend a young girl, a tween who's going into this, to be on foods like what we're talking about, for her to have a smooth transition into this amazing time of her life of menstruation, and feel good while she's doing that, not suffer from dysmenorrhea, not suffer from lots of acne or hormonal imbalances that we all think is normal, because people are eating the wrong diet.
Exactly. Better. Great to me. Like the quality of the fats and the sources of fat definitely make a huge difference.
Yes.
So next question: what is your perspective on people who develop digestive problems with plants, even fruit, after being vegan for years, sometimes, and go to carnivore?
This is what I was saying in the beginning, where we could probably speak for hours. This is where I talk about individuality, because this is the kind of thing where, and I have clients all the time who come to me with digestive issues, and I really believe in crafting an individualized healing protocol for somebody based on the underlying issue of their problem. So the first thing I would say is figure out where your underlying cause for digestive problem. I do that, I'm sorry, just to say it's a huge umbrella. It could be bloating, it could be diarrhea, it could be IBS, it could be inflammatory bowel syndrome, it could be fibromyalgia showing up. There's a whole thing about the gut brain connection also. So we know that mood, things like anxiety, depression, affect your ability to digest. It could be disordered eating that's causing you to have problems with digestion. There's so much. So working with a holistic or a holistic minded practitioner who hopefully I would recommend has good knowledge on veganism and vegan diets, a vegan lifestyle, is what I would recommend to get to your reason for digestive discomfort. I will say to you that in the decade now that I've been a doctor for 15 years, but I've been actually using plant-based foods and diet in my healing protocols with my patients for about 8 years, since I basically went raw. I couldn't be quiet about it. I've always seen digestion get better. As long as we address their underlying issue, you can craft a plant-based regimen that addresses this. So get a diagnosis, get to the underlying reason, and then craft with your practitioner the issue, the holistic plan or the integrative plan to deal with that. Because I can just give you a couple of things. One is that if you're having a food intolerance, this is what I see a lot. If you're having a gluten intolerance, a food intolerance that is impeding your digestion and preventing you from digesting, then you're going to have problems with plant foods, a lot of different plant foods. The problem is not the food. The problem is you may have a food intolerance to something that could be gluten, that could be soy, that could be shrimp. It could be definitely milk is huge, lactose intolerance, but then people blame the vegetables they then eat afterwards, not the milk. That's just one example. Another one, like I mentioned, could be anxiety or depression that's affecting your gut. Those are just two that come to mind. Another one could be something like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. There's so many. And so I can't go too deep, but I would just say, understand the diagnosis and then craft a healing plan with your practitioner. And you can do that on a plant-based regimen that will actually help the problem.
Yeah, I will add also that so many of the people who are ex-vegan, and I'm not putting everybody in the same box, but the ones that, I mean, I know where this question is coming from, but the ones that even on fruit for years have been mostly raw or raw vegans, we don't know exactly how honest these people are. I mean, I hate to say that, but some people portray themselves differently, you know, when they are on social media, that when they're doing behind the scenes. And we have so many examples. We are not here to point fingers. We are all humans and we are all learning. However, that this honesty of certain people could be misleading to the newbies and say, you know, you see that example, you see how this social media ex-raw vegan celebrity fall. It's not because all of us are going to fall in the future. It's just use your discernment and see the people who are doing this. And I hate to say this, all of us have this personal journey of personal development, and honesty, transparency, authenticity, all of these things are part of our personal development journey. So not just because they have the perfect body, because they have the perfect mood on camera, that means that they're being honest with what they're doing. And I'm not saying that everybody does that, but that's probably some of the cases. And the other one is that raw veganism is not fasting like crazy. Fasting has its time and place, but many people fall into this idea of like, oh my God, I need to fast every week. I mean, yeah, fasting is an amazing therapeutic strategy when needed, but there are some girls that are doing this extensive fasting and they blame the diet, but it's not the diet. Raw veganism is not drastic fasting. That's my point. So
Those are some excellent points, Areli. And it led me to just say one last thing. I love how you mentioned
yeah.
everything you said, and to also say that I kept talking about the gut brain because as somebody who also self-healed from severe depression, I talk about that in my book, Delicious Healing. I can share with you that a lot of people who suffer from digestive issues, it's not even, it could be definitely something going on like a parasitic infection or like irritable bowel syndrome, but it could also be, again, things like anxiety, depression, other mood issues, lack of sleep will affect your digestion. So sometimes we look to the diet to heal things that the diet has no business healing. We say, oh, we should, if this is the perfect diet, then my insomnia should go away, my anxiety should go away, but they're not getting enough sleep, they're not reducing the stress, they're doing too much internet consumption. So I think sometimes we put way too much on the diet. And I think especially when it comes to digestion, because again of that gut brain connection, really look outside the diet of how can I have a more balanced and healthy life. And you can find many times that will actually heal the digestive issue.
Excellent. Agree.
Okay, next question. Thank you, really. Sorry, one second. Okay. I'd love to know the best resource book, question mark, for the raw vegan lifestyle. I have been vegan for almost 8 years, and it's only ever been easy because I went vegan purely for animal rights. I know raw veganism is for me, but I have always struggled sticking to it long term. So raw vegan resources, book resources.
Yeah, as medical doctors, I am one of the first proponents that our arrogance as MD trained should be like fall, like immediately disappear, because this is health is in our best interest as humanity, not only just because you have a degree. It gives you the right to discredit everybody else just because they don't have the credentials that we have. So having said that as a premise, I would recommend books that are not necessarily written by MDs, like a chiropractor, which is Dr. Graham, Doug Graham. I think it's an amazing book, The 8 and 10. And again, it's not the Bible, it's just a reference. It's just a guideline to see how fruit is so important for our human diet. We are frugivores, not fruitarians. Fruitarians is not only eating fruit all day long, it's frugivores, mostly fruit, and then give room for some protein and fats coming from raw sources. And if you are not 100% raw as well, this book teaches you the proportions and the ratio
Hmm.
of macronutrients. The other book that is more scientifically oriented is Becoming Raw by Brenda Davis. She brings a lot of medical and nutrition literature to back up our raw vegan lifestyle. And again, she names raw vegans into different categories, but she has a percentage. Like if you eat 75% of your food consumption from raw sources, you are considered a raw vegan. And many purist raw vegans say, no, if you're not 100% raw vegan, you're not a raw vegan. It's like purism. So
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't work that way, especially for people who are transitioning from a Western diet. The becoming raw and adopting even a 75% raw food diet is optimal, because otherwise it's not sustainable if you do like an overnight shift. For some people is, but for the majority of us it's not. So those two are my sources, I would say.
Those are wonderful. It's funny, Brenda Davis's Becoming Raw Vegan was going to be one of mine also. Um, I'm going to start by answering this question a little bit differently. I love how you became very clear about your why for veganism. For you, it's animal rights. And so I think whenever we have such a clear why, I talk about this. I have a webinar called The 5 Tips for Being Successful in a Raw Vegan Diet. So it's not a book, but it's an hour-long webinar that I created as a medical doctor and as a raw vegan who is now living this lifestyle very easily. You can check that out if you're interested in that. But one of the things I mentioned as a tip is be so clear about your why. It will help so much. And I think probably the ease around veganism for you is because you're so clear that for you, at least one of the big things is animal rights. Get clear for yourself on your why for raw veganism. You said, I know raw veganism is right for me. Why? Tell us more, or tell yourself more. Be very clear about the why for that, because that will then help you to figure out the resource to go to that could actually support that. If your why is, for example, I don't like the fact that enzymes are destroyed, some enzymes are destroyed, or I might have a nutrient deficiency, Brenda Davis's book, Becoming Raw Vegan, I think can be wonderful support for that, because she will walk you through how some nutrients really do get destroyed, or at least highly affected in a negative way by the cooking process. Very scientific, very evidence-based. If your why is more spiritual, think about Gabriel Cousens' books. If your why is more about the planet and a higher vision of society, the second book I'm going to recommend, I talked about Brenda Davis, is actually a book I think called Eden Fruitarianism. Now, it's a pretty hardcore book. It's by Mango Wozniak, I believe. He is a fruitarian, and I will say I'm not a fruitarian. I'm a frugivore, like Dr. Areli. I do a lot of fruit, but I also do greens. I eat a few nuts and seeds. But I think his vision for the world and his idea about living in peace with other sentient beings is really beautiful, and he talks about it really beautifully in this book. Another person that comes to mind is Ann Osborne's book. I'll leave a couple of links down below about some of these sources, but I think the more important answer to the question, as opposed to just naming a bunch of books I could rattle off, is know your why, and then use that to guide you to the book resource or the webinar resource or the YouTube resource that helps you, supports you in staying the course that you want.
Excellent. All right, so next question. Probably similar to the other question. Why do some people report immediately feeling better on meat?
So there are two answers to this. One, there's a well-known placebo effect in all areas of medicine. There really is. So if you are somebody, I want you just to get in the mindset of somebody, and let's do this with a lot of compassion. This might be actually a great exercise for some of us who might have immediate judgment coming up for vegans who then move to meat. But having compassion, I'd love for you to visualize somebody who's been eating a plant foods diet and decides to eat meat, right? There's a whole story behind that, right? So if you're there already, then something has not been working for you emotionally, physically, mentally. That diet has not been working for you, and so you are now pulled towards trying meat. If that's the case, when they eat meat, they can just feel this sense of relief, almost a catharsis that happens, kind of a release. If you're somebody who's struggling with your diet, whatever the diet is, it can cause so much stress. And the moment you let go of that stress by eating that which you no longer have put into I should not eat, you're going to feel better. Does that mean that the meat is good for you? Absolutely not. But I think this gets into the whole thing of shoulds versus choose. And I talk about this a lot with my patients and clients. I can eat whatever I want to. I choose and want to eat plant foods, but I can eat a steak if I want to. I can go and eat ham if I want to, but I don't want to. And I say that because I think the languaging around our choices is so important in terms of reducing stress and eating and following a vegan lifestyle easily. If we have this idea that we cannot eat X, Y, Z, or we should not eat X, Y, and Z, and it's just the should and the can'ts, it can cause so much stress, so that when we let that go by eating that thing, there's actually this, again, catharsis release. That's one answer. The second answer, very, very, very quickly, is just that sometimes meat can have things like calories, fat, something like, for example, iron, that your diet may have been lacking in. Not because a plant foods diet doesn't have enough calories, iron, or fat, but because you have made that vegan diet in a way that is restrictive. And so I've seen people who go to meat because they're not eating enough calories, they're fasting to the point that they're depleted and they're nutrient depleted, or they're eating a vegan diet. It's vegan, but it's not whole foods, it's not whole, it's not healthy. There are all sorts of vegan diets out there. And so they're then lacking that nutrition, or they are not absorbing well. They go to the meat, and it's a quick source. It is a quick source, that's for sure, of calories, fat, and some minerals. But it doesn't mean that's the ideal thing. It just might mean that your diet, your vegan diet, your kind of vegan diet was not as healthy as it could be.
Excellent answers. So I will add also along the same lines that your second answer went to, that remember, it's not the same eating a bowl, because I was eating grapes here. It's not the same eating a bowl of grapes than a big chunk of meat. A bowl of grapes is probably going to have 300 calories. A piece of meat, especially a greasy one, it's going to have 600 to 800 calories. So as Tumi was mentioning, it's not probably you're deficient on iron, on fat from animal, saturated fat from animal sources. So that's going to give you immediate satiation. And even though it's smaller, that chunk of steak that fits in that bowl, the calorie, the density of the nutrients, because let's be real, I mean, meat is nutritious, of course it is, but has consequences. All the saturated fat, all the hormones, all the antibiotics, right? So, and the ethical part, that's what we choose not to, because we can get those nutrients from plant sources. But just bring things into consideration and evaluate, like the size, but the nutrient dense and the calorie density. The other is, just as meat has a lot of hormones, a lot of fats and antibiotics, it's also a stimulant, because remember, in the process of killing the animal, they are undergoing tremendous stress and pressure. So at the moment that they're gonna die, they're releasing a lot of adrenaline and stress hormones, and that definitely gets and rush into the animal's muscle, and we get basically an overdose of adrenalines and steroids. So the hormones and the meat that you're eating is basically an stimulant for you. It's just like caffeine. If I drink coffee, I quit coffee, but if I choose to drink coffee because I want to be more alert, I will have it. And just like a quarter of a cup is going to elicit that response in me, that alertness, because it's a stimulant. So the same goes with me.
Oh, great points. Great. I love that you brought the stimulation in. Okay, so maybe we'll wrap up here, but definitely stay tuned for part 2. It's coming.